is an interesting one for Kamala Harris and her team, is this idea of we're not going back.
Yeah.
And it's such a not just powerful, but empowering statement in so many ways. How do you read that language and the elevation of this idea, we're not going back? What does it mean for women? What does it mean for people of color across the country? And what does it mean largely for the country itself?
Well, I think, look, I mean, the Trump's whole shtick is that he's going to bring everyone back to the 1950s. So, and he's been doing that for 8 years, right? That we're going to go back to make America great again, right?
Right. Original.
And
That's
yeah,
original.
but it harkens back to Charles Lindbergh, and Ronald Reagan used the slogan too.
Right.
So it is this, there was a time in American life when a white man was king, right? That's really what they're saying, is you don't want these people coming to our country. You don't want women trying to have their fair share. You don't want, you just want to be, by virtue of the fact that you're a white man, get stuff. And like, I think that was sort of the message. And here we have a woman who has, I mean, that video, one of my favorite moments is the video that the RNC research account tweeted, which was her laughing about how you have to, if they don't open the doors for you, you have to break down the doors, if they don't open the door behind you. And I think she's a historic candidate. She was a district attorney, attorneys general, first female attorneys general of the state of California, first, second Black woman senator ever, right? I mean, it's crazy. She was the first East Asian senator ever. I mean, she was a history maker and the first female vice president. So I think that, you have this one candidate who has this very dark vision of bringing America back to the 1950s, ending no-fault divorce, regulating the birth control pill, which has been, has approval. Yeah. And, wants to make it so you can't send mifepristone on the mail, so that you have the 10 commandments in your schools. I mean, this is really like, kind of Christian nationalism sprinkled with 1950s stuff. And then you have this other candidate who is just sort of breaking down barriers and who really has sort of is all about forward motion and has a life that was not available to her mother.
Well, it's interesting. You hit on a number of things that that strike chords, I think, particularly ironic ones, when you look at and listen to a party that's now, and again, I'm still a member of this party largely because it pisses them off, and it gives me the power to look them in the eye and say they're full of shit and to call them out on it. And it gives me an opportunity to wrestle back at some point, whatever remnants of traditional republicanism may exist. But at the same time, it also, gives an opportunity to sort of push out and make people focus on the fact that a party that now is deeming itself this sort of white Christian nationalist standard bearer, that is all about telling women to live by the 10 commandments, and at the same time supporting a gubernatorial candidate in North Carolina, the lieutenant governor there, who from a church pulpit says it's a time for killing.
No.
Killing those who disagree with him, killing those who, in his view, stand in the way of pushing out narratives that support women's health and reproductive rights, et cetera. It still amazes me, Molly, how much of the country feeds off that pablum and still will buy those narratives, which is why I think when you look at this race, despite the good momentum that's created, that there's still an appeal out in the country for that. There's still an appeal for Donald Trump amongst a lot of Americans, amongst a lot of white females who, Donald Trump won their vote.
45% of white women voted for Donald Trump, which is
Yeah, and that's on the heels of Access Hollywood and all the other things that we learned between 16 and now about this man. What caution do you throw up at this point for, and I'm not going to put this in the context of Democrats running the race, but Americans who are looking to stand and fight on behalf of the country, knowing that on the other side of that fight is this mindset that says, yeah, let's make America great again.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely am concerned, and I think we all are. I mean, look, the stakes, this is not like she's running against Nikki Haley or
Right.
Mitt Romney or someone who is who's a respectable conservative who will say, I lost. We know what Donald Trump's going to do. If he loses or if he wins, he's going to say he won. We know, I mean, so I do think it's really scary. And then the other thing is we know what the polls are showing now, and she has a lot of momentum, but you and I both know that polls have been wrong. And so we're really, I think that I'm certainly not going to feel great until we're in January.
So final point before I let you go. I alluded to it before and spoke a little bit about it, but when you look at the various factions within the Democratic Party, they have aligned themselves very well. And I know that there was a lot of concern about the more progressive members of the party. But Bernie Sanders has come out and endorsed, Governor Walz. AOC, I believe, has done. So the progressive wing of the party seems okay. Again, not saying that means he is this hard left progressive. But what's your take on the coalition, the reemergence of the coalitions within the Democratic Party coming to a better place to move forward into the fall?
Well, Joe Manchin also endorsed him. So he's got, and Joe Manchin is more than happy to be a pain in the butt about stuff, right? So he does not, he wouldn't just be, a lot of Democrats, you'd say, well, they're just pulling the party line, but Joe Manchin has no interest in that. So look, he's a very well-liked governor with a lot of friends, and he's very good at reaching across the aisle, having relationships with people. These are the things you want in a candidate, and these are the things you want in a vice president, someone who can go. I mean, one of the great things that Biden was able to do was he was able to go down to the Senate and make deals. And so I do think it's quite good. And I would add that I think that I don't know. I mean, I think the progressives have been really good partners with Biden, and they have been, Biden has done a lot of progressive legislation, but they have really had his back. I mean, to a fault, right? AOC and Bernie have really had his back. I don't, this whole narrative about how Shapiro was the more centrist, more electable pick never really held water to me because and again, we talked about this a minute ago, but he really, really in my mind was a choice between someone who comes from Philadelphia and is urban versus someone who is sort of from rural Minnesota and has a sort of more farmery situation. So I never thought of it as sort of left versus right. But I think it's definitely being, painted that way. I also think that I think that he's also the vice president. So he's not the president. And as you and I both know, like you don't want a vice president who where they become the story.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, exactly. Note to Trump: you don't want a vice president who becomes the story.